We want to see who's breaking quarantine. And they go, well, look, there's 30 people congregating in a park who shouldn't be there. Maybe it's a religious group. Maybe it's a political group. And you know what? That capability will exist in 3 months, in 3 years, and in 30 years if we allow it to be implemented today. Yeah, I just, for anybody out there who's listening right now, who's struggling, because this has been not a good few weeks. This has been a very difficult few weeks for everyone, really, everywhere. It's not wrong, it's not weird to be scared. I have family members who have lost their jobs. I think everybody has. We are in a vulnerable position, and we are being made to depend on a system that we do not really understand and do not have that much control over these days. And I want people to think about the fact that this is an election year, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that this crisis is not going to be exploited to change that, to delay elections, to try to change the things that we're thinking about. Because it gets back to this moment of, in a crisis, we are asked for sacrifices. There's a limited amount of resources, and we're being said they have to be applied in this way. They go to these people, not these people. And there are not many moments in history where everybody in a country, everybody in the world, is sent to, go to their room without supper and just sit there and think until you can come out a few weeks later. That is vanishingly rare, and it is extraordinary that this is happening at the same moment that we have a political opportunity to change this system. Ask yourself why. For decades, you have been asked to give more and more. And when a moment of crisis comes and Congress starts throwing money around, we are getting the smallest portion of the resources. Instead, it's going off to banks and airlines and commercial lending paper and finance, and none of this stuff anybody but the Congress people who are benefiting from it understand. And then think about now the only thing that we have left, our rights, our ideals, our values as people. That's what they're coming for now. That's what they're asking us to give up. That's what they're asking to change. And remember that from a perspective of a free society, a virus is a serious problem. It is harmful. But the destruction of our rights is fatal. That's permanent. What do you see happening? What's in the headlines? What's happening in the politics of your country? What's happening with technology? What's happening with business? What's happening with your ability to get a job, to take care of your family? For me, it feels like everything is on fire. We have problems everywhere, and the people who are in charge are more interested in making the problems worse than making them better. And so I have to ask you, did you agree to this? Theoretically, we live in democracies, right? We're supposed to be in charge. But if you ask yourself, and you ask the people who created the world that we're in today, did the public agree to this? You'd get a lot of different answers. Lawmakers would say that it doesn't matter. The police would say that you don't have a choice. It's the law. And Facebook and Google and Apple and all of these other guys who control the modern internet that connects all of our lives together, they would say, actually, you did agree. You consented to this. But I don't think that's true. And I bet you don't think so either. See, the people who run the system, they pretend that we consent. They pretend we agree because of where we were born, or where we have no choice but to live, or simply because we had to click the OK button in order to use our phone when we take it out of the box for the very first time. There are these gates that are created step by step throughout our lives, these systems that are designed to control the flow of our movements, the flow of our lives, how we can interact with society. These are gates that separate where we are today from where we want to be tomorrow. And in order to pass through these gates, increasingly, you have to click that OK button. But you're not actually agreeing to it because you don't actually have a choice. If you can't use a phone, you can't contact your family, you can't contact your friends, you can't contact your place of work, you can't get a place of work. You can't interact with your bank, you can't make payments, you can't buy things online, you can't order a taxi, you can't do anything. Because first you must pass through this gate that you have to say, I'll do whatever you want, please just let me interact with society. But that's not consent, not in any way that really matters. These digital structures of control are affecting all of us. And I think that every person today is realizing that this lack of consent actually matters. Speaking quite plainly, that we matter and what we want matters, even if every day we are told by politicians and by programs that that's not true. You see this also happening in public health with attempts to control the pandemic, which is a serious problem. But the response to this new threat of infection is becoming more serious than the disease itself, because people are trying to pass emergency laws, emergency measures, new methods of surveillance, new ways to control us, new ways to look at our records. And while eventually the coronavirus pandemic will be defeated, there's nothing in the world more permanent than a temporary law. So where does this lead us? This leads us to the question of what is known about us, by whom and why. That means that we need to talk about digital security, or rather digital insecurity, that is making all of our lives vulnerable, right? We are subject to influence, we are subject to control, and this control is informed, this influence is provided by the surveillance that occurs as a result of that digital insecurity. So all of this together means that we're going to be talking about power. Why? Because the only people that are interested in big data, mass data, all of these records from all of these people, they're not interested in it simply for the sake of collecting it, right? They're not academics, they're not performing a study. They're collecting data, they're creating perfect records of private lives because of what it provides them, because of the utility that it represents. Now, whether we're talking about Facebook determining what kind of ads you see, or something more concrete, like the police deciding who gets investigated, or a military deciding who gets invaded, information is simply a convenient means, a mechanism for attaining a certain kind of power, and that power is control. Now, typically in a democracy, control over the general outline of society is intended to be exercised by us, by the people broadly, with their will imposed upon all of the powerful institutions that generations of our families have constructed, created, put together. Whether those institutions are the police with powers of detention and arrest, imprisonment, or even killing, military and spy agencies, or even corporations, businesses. We create regulations and structures, outlines and rules that are supposed to say what they can and can't do, create rules of fair play. But when we look at today, when you look around at that world and you go, did you agree to this? I think you will recognize that we have stumbled upon a problem. And that's that the people are no longer in control. Particularly when it comes to surveillance. Surveillance technologies have outpaced the traditional democratic means of controlling them. A generation ago, there were limitations on the way this could be used, even by the most aggressive of governments, because surveillance was difficult, it was costly, it was expensive. I worked for the CIA, I worked for the NSA, I know how this has changed. Government previously had to spend huge sums of money to track just particular sets of individuals, a handful of people. To know somebody's location might involve many different teams of surveillance officers, both in buildings and out on the streets, that are working in shifts. Today, that dynamic has reversed. You can have one guy sitting behind a desk in a building, and he can track huge numbers of people And the computer just updates them on, oh, this person turned on their phone.